Fifth Grade Magic by Beatrice Gormley. Copyright 1982. Chapter 9. More Trouble. For a moment, Gretchen wondered whether her mother was all right. But she was so glad to be herself again, she couldn't really feel worried. Everything would settle down in a little while. Happily wiggling her own fingers, Gretchen skipped back up to her room to make sure her things were in order. The photograph folder was lying open on the floor. Probably the magic was gone from it, but just in case, Gretchen tore off the newspaper picture of Amy and the school picture of herself, taking care to keep them from touching, and slipped her Aunt Mary Ann's picture back in. Then she threw the picture of Amy in the wastebasket and put her own picture back in the desk. When she went back downstairs, her mother was cooking tomato sauce in wide noodles, while Jason clutched at her legs. "Lasagna, yum," said Gretchen, leaning against the counter, but Mrs. Nichols didn't look up. "Take Jason over there," she motioned across the divider with her elbow, "and play with him, will you? I'm going to pour the boiling water off the noodles now, and I don't want him around." Her voice sounded strange. Gretchen scooped Jason up and carried him around the divider, sitting down on the floor near the sofa. She began to play the face game with him. "Where's Gretchen's nose?" He poked her nose with a fat finger. "Right. Where's Gretchen's chin?" As he poked her chin, the phone beside the refrigerator rang. Mrs. Nichols picked it up. "Hello? Mrs. Perbola? Oh, yes, the school counselor. Emotional problems? Mrs. Shepherd said that?" There was an indignation in her voice. "Yes, I'd be glad to come talk to you because... Fine, 9 o'clock tomorrow." Gretchen was listening hard, forgetting about Jason. Mrs. Perbola, the school counselor? There was going to be more trouble. Gretchen felt a sinking feeling in her stomach. Jason squealed, waving a hand in front of her face. She turned back to him and let him point to Gretchen's cheek, Gretchen's hair, Gretchen's mouth. If she didn't change the game, Gretchen's eyes would be next. "Okay, let's do it the other way. Where's Jason's ear?" "Right, where's Jason's..." There was a crash and a splat in the other end of the kitchen, and a cry from Mrs. Nichols. Gretchen leapt to her feet and ran around the divider. Her mother stood in front of the open oven door, staring at the red-orange sauce oozing over the floor, over noodles and white curds of ricotta cheese and the shining splinters of the glass lasagna pan. "I have had it!" Her mother was staring at the mess on the floor, but Gretchen was afraid she was thinking about something else. "I'll clean it up, Mom." "You certainly will not touch that broken glass." Mrs. Nichols seemed to pull herself together with an effort. "Just get the baby out of here." She pointed to Jason, who had crawled past Gretchen and was patting his hand in the edge of the pool of sauce. Grabbing a paper towel, Gretchen hauled Jason back near the sofa again, wiped his hand, and began to play patty cake with him. But her heart wasn't in it. She listened to the pieces of the lasagna pan clinking in the wastebasket. When Mr. Nichols came whistling in the door a little later, Mrs. Nichols met him with her coat on. "I'm going to pick up a pizza for dinner. Don't even ask." The door closed behind her. Mr. Nichols turned his bewildered gaze to Gretchen, sitting on the sofa and pretending to read a book. Picking at the cording on the sofa cushions, she looked sideways at him. Here came the questions. Daddy was going to think she was a real jerk. Her stomach sank again. At 9 o'clock the next morning, Gretchen and her mother sat down on the hard bench outside the adjustment counselor's office. A few latecomers scurried by on their way to their classrooms, giving them curious glances. To avoid meeting their eyes, Gretchen twisted around and studied the sign taped on the frosted glass of the door. Adjustment counselor. Adjustment made Gretchen think of tinkering with a screwdriver and a wrench, the way her mother had adjusted the seat of her bicycle last summer. They sat in silence. Mrs. Nichols picked some lint from her suit. She looked at her watch. She crossed her legs, uncrossed them, and crossed them again the other way. Then a woman in a dark skirt came out of the teacher's room down the hall, carrying a mug of coffee. She smiled, but her eyes were intent. "Mrs. Nichols, I'm Deborah Perbola, the adjustment counselor." They shook hands. "Hello, Gretchen." "Mrs. Nichols, I'd like to talk with you first, then Gretchen." The frosted glass door closed behind Mrs. Nichols and the adjustment counselor. Gretchen imagined the counselor lifting a giant wrench from a pegboard in her office and fitting it around her mother's head. "Now, if you'll just hold still, Mrs. Nichols." Of course, Gretchen was the one who needed adjusting, not her mother. At least the counselor would think Gretchen needed adjusting, because Mrs. Perbola had no idea what had really happened. But maybe there is something wrong with me, thought Gretchen. How could I think I could change bodies with Amy without upsetting anyone, especially Amy and me? Gretchen heard the door at the end of the hall clang, and then she saw a woman and a girl walking toward her, the woman's high heels clicking angrily. It was Amy and her mother. Meeting Amy's reproachful stare, Gretchen wished she could explain to her that the messed up magic was Aurora's fault, that Gretchen hadn't really meant to make life hard for Amy. She couldn't explain, but at least she could say something friendly. Hi, At Mrs. Satcher's tiger-like glare, Gretchen's greeting died in her throat. Amy and her mother sat down on the bench, Mrs. Satcher placing herself between Amy and Gretchen. The three of them sat in silence. Mrs. Satcher crossed her legs. Her foot twitched back and forth like the tail of a cat about to pounce. Gretchen edged down the bench, away from Amy's mother. The frosted glass door opened, and Mrs. Nichols came out. She and Mrs. Satcher glanced at each other, then looked away. It was the first time Gretchen had ever seen her mother not speaking to someone. "Mrs. Satcher?" asked Mrs. Perbola from the doorway. "And Amy? How are you?" She smiled at them. "It'll just be a few minutes. Gretchen, please come in. Mrs. Nichols, thanks very much. I'll give you a call later today." As Gretchen stood up, Mrs. Nichols cast a worried look at her. "Goodbye, darling. I'll be at my office if you need me." Gretchen ducked under Mrs. Perbola's arm. "Bye, Mom." She wished her mother hadn't talked to her like that in front of other people. Of course, there was no pegboard of adjusting tools in the counselor's office. There was a file cabinet and bookshelves and a chair beside the desk. Mrs. Perbola made a motion for Gretchen to sit down. Leaning back in her chair, the counselor said, "I guess you were pretty disappointed when Amy got the part you wanted in the play." Mom must have told her that. "Yes," said Gretchen. "Angry enough to hit somebody?" The counselor toyed with her coffee mug as if the answer didn't matter much. But Gretchen knew better. It was the same question her father had asked her, with disbelief in his voice, last night. "I guess so." They must all think she was a brat. But it wasn't Amy's fault. Mrs. Perbola looked puzzled, but she went on. "Then if Amy's not to blame, there must be someone else you're angry with." Her head to one side, the counselor regarded Gretchen intently. I just wonder who that could be, Gretchen. Someone else you're really angry with." Gretchen was silent for a moment, looking down at her lap. Was it all right to tell Mrs. Perbola how angry she was at Mrs. Shepherd? How unfair the teacher was? Grown-ups usually stuck together. But the adjustment counselor was nodding encouragingly. Taking a deep breath, Gretchen said, "It's your baby brother, isn't it?" Mrs. Perbola nodded again. "I can't blame you. After all, you had your mother and father's undivided attention before he came along." Gretchen could not speak. How humiliating! How insulting! Did Mrs. Perbola think she was a 3-year-old, jealous of a little baby? "Jason," she finally exclaimed. "I take care of Jason. He's just a baby." The counselor was still nodding. "Of course these bad feelings are very hard to admit to, but that doesn't make them go away. You see, Gretchen, angry feelings are like water rushing through a hose. If you stop up the end of the hose, it'll spring a leak somewhere else." Right now, Gretchen's angry feelings were leaking out in the direction of Mrs. Perbola, but she kept her mouth shut. Mrs. Perbola's explanation made Gretchen look even more like a spoiled brat, but at least it was an explanation. It would stop them from asking more questions. "Things are different at your house than they used to be, aren't they?" the counselor was saying. "When you come home in the afternoon and want to talk to your mother, the baby's always there." Mrs. Perbola gazed sympathetically into Gretchen's eyes. Her face burning, Gretchen looked down. She hated Mrs. Perbola prying into the Nichols' private lives. She wanted to shout, "You don't know anything about it." "Well," the adjustment counselor stood up, "it's not easy to take a look inside and find out what's really going on, but I'll bet it's a relief to get it all out in the open. How old is your baby brother? 9 months?" Gretchen pushed herself out of the chair. 11 months, she muttered. Mrs. Perbola smiled such a sickening, kindly smile that Gretchen turned her head aside. 11 months is a long time to keep feelings bottled up inside you. If you want to talk some more later, I'm always here, Gretchen. She opened the door. "Mrs. Satcher?" Amy's mother rose from the bench, giving Gretchen a hard look. "I'd rather not leave my daughter alone with this girl after what happened." "Gretchen is going straight to her classroom now," Mrs. Perbola said calmly. "Please come in, Mrs. Satcher." Taking the hint, Gretchen started to walk toward the stairs. But as soon as the office door closed, she heard Amy whisper, "Gretchen." Gretchen turned to see Amy leaning forward from the bench, holding out something orange and fluffy. "Here, your pencil." Walking back toward Amy, Gretchen reached out to take the pencil. Then she drew her hand back. No, you keep it. But it's yours, said Amy. Gretchen looked down at the floor and scuffed her foot back and forth. She wanted to say something to Amy, but what could she say? I'm sorry about... Oh, just keep the pencil. Whirling, she ran down the hall to the stairs. Chapter 10. The Cruelest Month. During the next weeks, Gretchen felt like a turtle, either plodding along or drawn back into her shell. At first, she wouldn't even play with the other girls at recess. She was sure they were whispering to each other that she was emotionally disturbed because her mother paid too much attention to her baby brother. That kind of thing always got around. Anyway, they had all seen, or thought they had seen, Gretchen attacking Amy like a crazy person. Finally, Beth persuaded her to join in the Foursquare games, but still Gretchen would hardly speak to the others. At home, the only person who acted normal was Jason. Gretchen's mother and father must have believed Mrs. Perbola's explanation. Now, whenever Daddy picked Jason up to bounce him, he would suddenly seem to remember something. He would put Jason down and give Gretchen a squeeze. And if Mom said to Jason, "What a big boy, drinking from a cup," she would hastily turn to Gretchen with, "I like the way you set the table without being reminded." The worst thing was that Gretchen couldn't tell them to stop it. Gretchen couldn't forget about the play either. Every Wednesday after school, she had to go down to the gym for rehearsal. "I can't take the time to rehearse your understudies unless someone in the main cast is absent," said Mr. Grossi. "But that doesn't mean you don't have to pay attention. If we do need you, you'll have to know your lines." The other understudies fidgeted and whispered, but Gretchen sat on the gym floor with her eyes fixed on the stage. She knew Polly Winsome's lines all right. Soon she knew every line in the play. She felt like a little kid without any money, pressing her nose against a candy shop window. One day in April, the class pictures were delivered, and Mrs. Shepherd passed them out just before the dismissal bell. "Memories are made of this," it said on the envelope. Why would I want to remember the worst years of my life, wondered Gretchen. She pushed the picture into her book bag unopened. At home, Mrs. Nichols was hunched over the kitchen table, sorting through piles of canceled checks, while Jason played with her shoelaces. "April is the cruelest month," she muttered as Gretchen came in. "It is?" asked Gretchen, startled. Maybe her mother understood the way she was feeling. "Hello, darling." Mrs. Nichols looked up and smiled at Gretchen. "Just a joke about income taxes. How was your day?" "Fine," said Gretchen without enthusiasm. "Do you have any aluminum foil pie pans I could bring to school? We're making papier-mâché pies for the play." "Oh, the play." Mrs. Nichols' worried eyes searched Gretchen's face. "I guess so. I'll see you in a minute." Then her glance fell on Jason, toddling away from the table with a stray check clutched in his fist. "Grab that from Jay, will you?" After retrieving the check, Gretchen climbed over the baby gate and trudged up the stairs to her room. "April is the cruelest month," she said out loud, dropping her book bag beside her desk. It fell over and the class picture slid out. "Memories are made of this." She shoved it, still unopened, into her bottom desk drawer. Now it was the third Wednesday in April. "It's shaping up." Mr. Grossi stood in front of the stage with her hands on her hips, her face shining pink. The children who were playing the townspeople looked down at her with pleased smiles. "That's what I call working together," she went on. "All right, Amy and Dennis, let's go over the last part of scene 1 again. Mrs. McAvoy," she turned toward Beth's mother at the piano, "can you give us the villain's entrance chords?" Sitting cross-legged on the gym floor, Gretchen watched Mr. Grossi guide Amy and Dennis through scene 1. Amy spoke toward the audience now, and she knew all her lines, but her face stayed as stiff and blank as a Barbie doll's. "Remember what we talked about the first time we read the script?" asked Mr. Grossi urgently. "Getting into your character's skin? I know you can do it, Amy. You had so much feeling in your voice that first day." Amy's face went even blanker, but she nodded. Gretchen shivered, looking away from the stage. She wished the teacher hadn't said that. "And Dennis, speak up. I know you have a fine, loud voice because I hear you shouting to your friends in the hall." Dennis grinned grudgingly. He shouted the next few lines, but then his voice sank back down to a mumble. On his way off stage, he pretended to hook a basketball shot at the basket hanging in front of the curtain. Finally, it was the first Wednesday in May, the day of the last regular rehearsal. When Gretchen left for school in the morning, she noticed all the branches of the spruces beside the driveway were tipped with new needles, pale green against the dark old needles. "Everything is new and fresh," she thought. The oak branches hanging over the lane had put out tender pink leaves. But Gretchen didn't feel new and fresh. She felt old and stale. 2 more days and the play would be over, thank goodness. That was the way she was thinking of it, as if it were a trip to the dentist. When the dismissal bell rang that afternoon, Gretchen walked down the stairs and into the gym with Beth. Mrs. McAvoy was already seated at the old upright piano beside the stage. Beth helped Gretchen set up the props for scene 1, and Gretchen helped Beth carry the spotlight on its tall stand to the back of the gym. Kathy and Amy came in and sat down on the edge of the stage. Dennis slouched in, but Miss Degrassi did not appear. Then the girl who was playing the mother pushed open the gym door. Beth called to her, "Where's Miss Degrassi?" Her voice echoed from the high ceiling. "She's sick," the other girl called back. "Where's Mrs. Shepherd?" "She isn't here." Beth turned to Gretchen. "I guess we can't rehearse today." That was enough for Dennis, who had already started slouching back toward the door. He turned to call, "See you later, losers," and almost bumped into Mrs. Shepherd. "I don't know why no one told me. Is everyone here for rehearsal?" The teacher hurried across the gym floor toward the stage, waving a copy of the script in one hand and a clipboard in the other. "People, I'm standing in for Miss Degrassi today, since she's not feeling quite well. I'm sure she'll be fine tomorrow. Now let's make the best use of our time, because the play is the day after tomorrow." "Thanks for the news flash," whispered Beth to Gretchen. Mrs. Shepherd looked at a list on her clipboard. "Scenery manager set up the scenery for scene 1. She looked at Gretchen's feet. "I believe that's Gretchen Nichols." "The scenery's all set up, Mrs. Shepherd," said Gretchen. What a good thing it was that Miss Degrassi, not Mrs. Shepherd, was directing the play. "Oh," Mrs. Shepherd glanced at the stage and pushed her glasses up her nose. "Let's start at scene 1 and go right through the play. Polly and Winnie Winsome on stage." Amy, still sitting on the edge of the stage, got to her feet. Dennis started to trudge up the steps to the stage. "No, Dennis, did I say your name?" Mrs. Shepherd's voice was sharp and nervous. Dennis shrugged and trudged down the steps, but a girl from Miss Degrassi's classroom said primly, "Miss Degrassi told Dennis to stand in the wings until his entrance cue." "Oh," said Mrs. Shepherd. "He's in this scene?" "All right, Dennis." Dennis shrugged again, rolled his eyes, and trudged back up the steps to the wings. Beth smothered a giggle. The whole rehearsal went that way. Each time Mrs. Shepherd gave them a direction, one of the children would say, "But Miss Degrassi told us." Then Mrs. Shepherd would press her lips tightly together and push up her glasses with a jab of her finger. At the end of the rehearsal, she said, more loudly than she needed to, "I'm sure Miss Degrassi will be back for the dress rehearsal tomorrow." But the next afternoon, Miss Degrassi was still sick. "Mrs. Shepherd, is Miss Degrassi going to be well enough to come tomorrow?" asked one of the girls from the other teacher's class. "Of course she is." Mrs. Shepherd looked as though she would go to Miss Degrassi's house and drag her out of bed if necessary. "I talked to her on the phone this morning, and she assured me she would pull herself together for the performance. 'The show must go on,' she said, so of course she'll be here tomorrow. Everyone ready for scene 1? "Mrs. Shepherd," said Beth, "I can't find the spotlight." "What do you mean?" The teacher whirled to face Beth. "The spotlight must be there. How could it get lost? It's too big to get lost." "It's not lost, it's gone." Holding a braid with each hand, Beth looked stubbornly at Mrs. Shepherd. "I always put it backstage by the gymnastics mats, and it isn't there." "All right, it's gone. We'll have to worry about that later. Everyone in scene 1 on stage." "But Mrs. Shepherd," said the girl who played Winnie Winsome, "this is the dress rehearsal. Where are the costumes?" "Where are the costumes?" Mrs. Shepherd looked as if her glasses were going to fall right off her face. "Where are the costumes?" Gretchen sat in the middle of the gym floor watching Mrs. Shepherd. "Maybe it's just as well I'm not in the play," she thought. "If Miss Degrassi doesn't come back, it's going to be terrible. It's going to be the worst play the 5th grade ever put on." But Amy spoke up. "My mother was supposed to bring the costumes, Mrs. Shepherd. I think she was going to leave them in the office." Mrs. Shepherd almost ran to the office, the children trailing after her. Sure enough, the costumes were there in a pile of labeled boxes and bags. With only a little confusion, the teacher handed out the costumes and sent the cast to the restrooms to change. Then Mrs. Shepherd looked around at the rest of the children. "Well, you're all understudies, aren't you? Miss Degrassi's illness made me think we'd better go over your parts, too. This flu is going around. But of course you've been rehearsing right along." "We haven't been rehearsing at all," said Beth matter-of-factly. "Miss Degrassi said she didn't have time to rehearse 2 casts, so we would just have to pick up the lines." Mrs. Shepherd gasped. "Not at all? Back to the stage right now. You're going through the play at least once." Shuddering as if she could imagine every one of the main cast sick in bed, she led the understudies back to the gym. So Beth and Gretchen climbed up on the stage for scene 1. Gretchen's heart began to race. And the minute she said her first line, all her dashed hopes rose up again. She was the perfect Polly Winsome, sweet and good and charming. She heard her own voice carrying so clearly to the back of the gym, to those rows and rows of people who would fill the room tomorrow afternoon. But Gretchen was the only understudy who knew her part. She had to prompt Beth a few times, and she whispered whole lines to the boy playing the villain. Having missed most of the rehearsals, he was even worse than Dennis. Gretchen wanted to go on playing Polly Winsome all afternoon, but before the end of scene 1, the cast was back in the gym with their costumes on. "Mr. Shepherd, shouldn't we start the dress rehearsal?" asked Kathy, swishing her ruffled skirt. "It's getting late." The teacher looked distracted. "Oh dear, I suppose we should. But you understudies are terrible." She paused, pushing her glasses up. "Almost all of you." "Mrs. Shepherd doesn't even like to say my name," thought Gretchen. As she climbed down from the stage, Amy brushed past her, holding up the skirt of her long dress. "Amy looks just right for the part," thought Gretchen with a pang. The blonde curls of her wig hung over the ruffled shoulders of her white dress, sprigged with little pink flowers. "But I would look like Polly Winsome, too, if I was wearing that dress and that wig." Gretchen ached with envy. Then an idea shot through Gretchen's mind like an electric shock. She stood staring straight ahead. If something happened to Amy, Gretchen would play the heroine. After all, she was the understudy. What could happen to Amy? Before Gretchen could stop herself, ideas popped into her mind. Amy could fall off the jungle gym tomorrow at recess and break her arm. Could she get lost in the woods behind the playground if someone let her in deep enough? She could accidentally get shut in the janitor's broom closet. What crazy ideas. Sighing, Gretchen sank down on the gym floor beside Beth and leaned back against the wall. She couldn't do anything that awful to Amy. Anyway, if she did, Mrs. Shepherd and Mrs. Probola and Mr. Mixel would find out, and they would probably send Gretchen to reform school. Roars of laughter interrupted Gretchen's thoughts. Looking up, she saw Amy standing in front of the cardboard stove, holding the oven door with a pot holder. The door had come off in her hand. Even Beth's mother at the piano was chuckling, but Mrs. Shepherd didn't laugh. "Scenery manager," she rapped out. "Aren't you supposed to keep these things in good repair? I expect you to stay after the rehearsal and mend the oven." Beth gave Gretchen a sympathetic glance, but Gretchen shrugged. That was just the way she expected Mrs. Shepherd to treat her. On stage, Dennis was slouching into the Winsome cottage. There were snickers from the other children at the sight of Dennis in a long black cape and top hat. "Swirl your cape around, Dennis," called Mrs. Shepherd. "And where's your mustache?" Scowling, Dennis gave his cape a half-hearted flip. He dug into his pocket and pulled out something that looked like a hairy caterpillar. "It won't stay on." The teacher sighed, folding her arms. "All right, just don't lose it. I'll bring some glue tomorrow and stick it on tight. Let's go over that entrance again and try to put some expression into it." Dennis seemed to have forgotten even the lines he knew yesterday. Every time Mrs. Shepherd had to prompt him, her voice was a little sharper. "He's embarrassed about wearing that costume," thought Gretchen. Poor Dennis. Quietly getting up and slipping backstage, Gretchen stood in the wings and began to whisper Dennis's lines to him. Amy and Dennis made quite a pair, she thought. Amy's acting like a wind-up doll, and Dennis is trying to pretend it isn't really him up there on the stage in a sissy costume. After the rehearsal, Beth helped Gretchen tape the oven door back on. Gretchen thought Mr. Shepherd had left the gym, but when she looked up, the teacher was leaning on the edge of the stage. "There you are, Gretchen." The teacher looked embarrassed. "You'll have to prompt Dennis tomorrow afternoon, the way you did today. He doesn't know his lines at all." "I can't imagine. Of course, Mr. Grassi will be in charge tomorrow, but I'm sure she would want you to do it too." Her eyes did not meet Gretchen's. Later, as Gretchen trotted past a bed of tulips on Maple Avenue, her thoughts about something happening to Amy slipped back into her head. "I wouldn't be able to prompt Dennis if, just supposing, if Amy couldn't be in the play and I took the part of Polly Winsome. Amy might come down with the flu. If Mr. Grassi can get sick, so can Amy." For the first time in weeks, a faint hope fluttered in Gretchen's chest. Slowing to a walk as she passed the Congregational Church, Gretchen frowned. White letters on the signboard announced the title of the next sermon. Is religion wishful thinking? That was what she was doing, wishful thinking. Wishful thinking couldn't make Amy get sick. But magic could. Gretchen stopped in her tracks. Aurora could do it. Aurora could give Amy the flu. No, the chicken pox. A little case of the chicken pox, like the one Gretchen had in 2nd grade. Gretchen didn't want to make Amy really sick. She just wanted to keep her out of school until after the play. With a burst of energy, Gretchen shot around the corner onto Thatcher Lane. That was it. Chicken pox. All the time and trouble she and Aurora had wasted on cutting hair and changing bodies, when the real solution was so simple. Chicken pox. Thoughts chattered in Gretchen's head as her sneakers pounded the sidewalk. She had to get to her bedroom and call Aurora. Would she come back? In the house, Gretchen waved a hello to her mother on the way to the stairs. "Don't you want a snack?" called Mrs. Nichols. "I actually made cookies." "Later," Gretchen called back. She closed her bedroom door. "Aurora," she said softly so her mother wouldn't hear. "Aurora, please come." She waited, looking around the room for a hint of a figure in a baggy blue suit. But the air remained empty. What had she said the first time? She had been looking in the mirror. Gretchen moved in front of the mirror. "Aurora, it's me, Gretchen. Help!" But still there was no answer. Aurora had to come. She had to. If she came, Gretchen would be the star of the play tomorrow. If she didn't, Gretchen would be hauling scenery and whispering Dennis's lines to him. She had to hear Gretchen and come. "Aurora! Aurora! Aurora!" The name rang in her ears in the silence that followed. Then there was a sharp knock at the door. "Gretchen? What in the world is all that noise about?" Mom had heard. Gretchen ran to open the door. "Oh, hi, Mom." Her mother, balancing Jason on one hip, gave her an irritated look. "Why are you roaring like that? You're going to shake the house down." "I'm sorry," Gretchen flushed. I was just pretending something. See? Roar!" She made a fierce lion face at Jason. "I was making wild animal noises." "All right," said Mrs. Nichols. "Please keep it down to a dull roar. I thought you'd hurt yourself." As soon as the door closed, Gretchen flung herself face down on the bed. Aurora was not going to come. Or worse, maybe there was no such person as Aurora. Maybe Gretchen was a little crazy. No one else had seen Aurora. Had those strange things that happened in March really been caused by magic? Maybe Gretchen had gotten completely confused. Maybe it had been her attacking Amy and pulling her hair, as everyone else thought. Then a light like the light from a movie projector fell across Gretchen's pillow. She hardly dared to turn around and look. "You extended a call for assistance?" Aurora's voice was breathless. Chapter 11. Solution: Chickenpox. "Aurora?" Sudden hope made Gretchen catch her breath. She rolled over. "Aurora, you—" Gretchen stopped, puzzled. That was Aurora, all right, hovering at the foot of Gretchen's bed, clutching her enchantulator. But she looked different. Instead of the baggy, drab blue uniform, she was wearing a short, pleated skirt and a white blouse. There was no cap on her head, and her hair hung loose around her shoulders. She looked much younger. In fact, she looked no older than Gretchen. "Shh!" Placing a finger over her lips, Aurora glanced behind her, although there was nothing Gretchen could see except the outline of her desk. "I'm afraid Aunt Injunctia's catching on to me." Gretchen felt something dawning on her. What do you mean, catching on? Who is Aunt Injuncta, anyway? Why are you wearing different clothes? Forcing a smile, Aurora waved her hand. It is my personal feeling that our topic of discussion should focus on a more meaningful area. Tell me about the play. Gretchen didn't answer at first. She couldn't get over how different Aurora looked. Then, as her eyes moved from Aurora's plump legs to her plump young face, bits and pieces fell into place in her mind. She felt an angry flush heating her face. You're not a fairy godmother at all, are you? You were just dressed up in someone else's clothes. Gulping, Aurora backed away from the foot of Gretchen's bed. Maybe I'm not quite a fairy godmother yet, but I will be, a very important one. My Aunt Injuncta is the director of the agency. I believe it, said Gretchen, because I bet you took her enchantulator, and I bet you were wearing her uniform, and I bet you're going to be in big trouble when she finds out. At this, Aurora's round cheeks quivered. I'm afraid she suspects. She locked her closet so I couldn't borrow a uniform. But you wouldn't tell her, would you? Since I've been so helpful, getting you the part you wanted in the play? Wouldn't I? Gretchen folded her arms. You didn't help me one bit. Changing with Amy didn't work. I couldn't stand being her. And now everyone thinks I'm a spoiled brat, and I'm still not going to be in the play. I'm much worse off than I was before. Oh, no. Aurora's voice was a croak. The spell went wrong again? She bit her lip. This seemed like such a simple case. I did very well in basic spells and approaches to problem-solving, you know, she added with a touch of pride. So when your first call came through and I was practicing on Aunt Injuncta's spare enchantulator, I thought if I did a good job on the case, Aunt Injunctor would be so proud of me she wouldn't punish me. Gretchen felt cold tingles run down her spine. So Aurora was just as young as she looked, much too young to be a fairy godmother. Letting Aurora work magic on her was like flying in an airplane piloted by Dennis Boyd. So I ducked back into Aunt Injunction's chamber, Aurora was saying, and borrowed a uniform. And that's how it happened. I just wanted to help you. No, you didn't, said Gretchen indignantly. You just wanted to show off, and you didn't know what you were doing. I'd like to tell your Aunt Injunction exactly what happened. Oh, no, please. Leaning toward Gretchen, Aurora clasped her hands pleadingly. Don't tell her. She'll send me away from the agency. She'll apprentice me to the tooth fairies. Then I'll never become a fairy godmother. Oh, please, I'll do... Gretchen stared stonily at Aurora. I'll do anything, whispered Aurora. Anything. Gretchen had almost forgotten about the chicken pox, the very reason she had called for Aurora. But now Gretchen knew Aurora had just been play-acting the part of a fairy godmother. She felt a twinge of fear. Wouldn't it be dangerous to ask Aurora to work any more magic? Then, in a surge of longing, Gretchen saw herself standing on the stage in Polly Winsome's long, white, ruffled dress, looking out over the rows of parents and children. They were clapping, clapping, clapping for her. The play was tomorrow. This was her last chance. Take it or leave it. All right, Gretchen told Aurora. You don't deserve it, but all right, I'll help you. I'll tell your aunt I never heard of you, and I don't believe in fairy godmothers anyway. That is, I'll help you if you'll help me. If you'll give Amy Satcher the chicken pox. Chicken pox? Aurora stared at Gretchen in dismay, slowly shaking her head. A disease? I'm sure that couldn't be the solution. It is, though, said Gretchen. Problem. Understudy can't play Polly Winsome unless Amy gets sick. Solution. Give Amy chicken pox. No, I'll show you. Aurora bent over the enchantulator, poking keys feverishly. Then a red light flashed from the panel, and the device began to sound a warning. Beep, beep, beep. It is the solution. Aurora spoke in such a low voice that Gretchen could hardly hear her over the beeping. But I can't do it. I'm not allowed to. That spell is for advanced certified agents only, she shivered. But Gretchen was thinking only of Polly Winsome. Okay, have fun with the tooth fairies. There was a long pause. Aurora pushed a button on the enchantulator, and the warning beep stopped. Then she let out a sigh. All right, I'll try. I need Amy's picture again, she added hopefully. Maybe you've lost it? Smiling, Gretchen jumped up from the bed, pulled her class picture from her desk drawer, and propped it against the pencil holder. There you go. This is a better one. It's even in color. Aurora gazed at the photograph. The child with the short blonde hair? She asked unhappily. Yes, you cut it yourself, remember? Aurora nodded glumly. Her arm trembling, she held the enchantulator out in front of her. Then a thought seemed to strike her, and her face brightened. This spell won't take effect until tomorrow morning. Maybe that would be too late. Tomorrow morning is fine, said Gretchen. Don't worry. She ignored Aurora's anxious, almost desperate expression. Clutching the enchantulator, Aurora swallowed. You'd better get back, way back. She frowned at the picture of Mrs. Shepherd's class. Amy has short blonde hair and a plaid shirt? I guess so, said Gretchen, sitting down on the bed. She couldn't see the picture from there. Yes, now I remember. She was wearing a plaid blouse that day. Something flashed across the edge of Gretchen's mind and then was gone. Something to do with the plaid. Aurora jabbed the keys of the enchantulator. Her face was pale and tight. Close your eyes! If the light goes haywire... Alarmed, Gretchen squeezed her eyes shut. This spell must be a dangerous one. She heard Aurora panting and Aurora's fingers tapping on the keys. In the darkness in front of her closed eyes, Gretchen imagined Amy's face. Big brown eyes under blonde bangs. Red spots all over her cheeks. Red spots. But as hard as Gretchen concentrated, the spots danced just to the side of Amy's face, like a cloud of gnats refusing to light. There! Gasped Aurora. Opening her eyes, Gretchen saw Aurora gripping the enchantulator with both hands. A thin but very bright stream of light shot like a laser beam out of the edge of the enchantulator toward the picture. In a quavering voice, Aurora chanted, Initially there exists a condition of discomfort in the area of the head. consequently causing a desire for a period in which rest could be attained. Following this, an increase in body-located temperature shall become evident as a function of direct experience. Just a little case of chicken pox, Gretchen said uneasily, but Aurora didn't seem to hear. Her forehead shone with perspiration, and a lock of hair fell over one eye. Gretchen could see she was hanging onto the enchantulator as hard as she could, but it bucked and throbbed in her hands like a chainsaw. Aurora took a deep breath and went on. To finalize, differential coloring of a reddish nature is to be seen in an ever-growing extent in the facial context. There was a crackling flash from the enchantulator and a ping like a light bulb exploding. Gretchen and Aurora stared in horror at the piece of wreckage in Aurora's hand. The casing of the enchantulator was shattered, and several keys had popped out from the panel, leaning every which way. "Oh no," moaned Aurora. "Anton Junction's enchantulator!" Vainly she tried to press the keys back into the panel. Then she froze, her head on one side. "Did you hear something?" Gretchen was about to say no when she distinctly heard a woman's voice. It sounded far away and hollow, as if it were coming through a tunnel, but still Gretchen could tell it was angry. Very angry. "Aurora, pursuant to avoiding negative consequences, it is strongly advised that you return to the agency." Throwing Gretchen a frightened look, Aurora vanished. "Remember, you promised." Her voice hung in the air. Gretchen sat on the edge of the bed, feeling goosebumps run over her arms. Well, it was done. Amy was going to get the chicken pox, and Aurora was going to get it from her aunt in Juncta. Too bad for them, Gretchen told herself. This was not the time to start feeling sorry for somebody else. She was going to play Polly Winsome tomorrow, and it would be the most wonderful moment of her life. She deserved it, after all she had been through. After dinner that night, Gretchen came up behind her father, who was leaning back in the rocker. She put her arms around his neck. "Daddy, do you think you could take off from work and come to the play tomorrow?" Tilting his head back, her father gazed at her upside down. You look funny with your mouth on your forehead, Gretchen. I thought you wouldn't want me to come to the play, since you weren't going to be in it." Gretchen smiled smugly. "Well, I do want you to come. I might have a big part after all. If Amy gets sick, I'll play the heroine, because I'm her understudy." Mr. Nichols' eyebrows went up. "Do you have a voodoo doll up in your room that you're sticking pins in or something?" he asked teasingly. Gretchen wished he hadn't said that, but she made herself laugh. "You bat brain, just come to the play, all right?"